Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the complimentary ICMI webinar, Empower Every Agent to be Your Best Agent, sponsored by Support.com. I'm Erica Strother, Community Specialist at ICMI, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we begin, let's take care of a few housekeeping items. First, make sure that you disable your pop-up blocker if it's currently turned on. You will notice that there are several icons at the bottom of the console window. The first one allows you to see our presentation slides, so please make sure that this one is maximized. Next, you'll see the Q&A icon. We'll be hosting a live Q&A at the end of our webinar today, and you can participate by asking questions at any time during the presentation. All you have to do is type your question into that window and then click Submit. Now, if you experience any technical difficulties during the presentation, you can click the question mark icon on the console to access the event help guide. Clicking on the other icons on the console will give you access to speaker bios, more information about our sponsor Support.com, as well as information about upcoming ICMI events and future webinars. And you can also download a version of today's presentation in PDF form. Now, speaking of upcoming events, we're really looking forward to celebrating the best and brightest in the industry at our Global Contact Center Awards Party in Orlando, Florida, next May. Is your contact center award worthy? Well, we want to help celebrate your success. So if you apply before December 31st, you will actually receive 50% off your entry fee. Just head over to icmi.com/awards for more information. Now, before we get going, I do want to let you know that our presentation will be made available for on-demand viewing following the live webinar today. You'll receive an email in the next couple of days with instructions for viewing the recorded presentation. And as you're watching our live event today, we really encourage you to be social. You can access your Twitter, your Facebook, and LinkedIn accounts directly through the event console. So please keep the conversations going and share what you learn. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. I'm honored to be joined by two esteemed industry experts, and speaking on behalf of ICMI is our Senior Analyst, Justin Robbins. Speaking for Support.com is Amy Millard, and she's the VP of Marketing at Support.com. You can learn more about Justin and Amy by clicking on the speakers icon on our console. Now, I know that Justin and Amy have an awesome presentation prepared for you guys today, but before we get started, I just want to remind you one more time, please don't forget to share what you learned today via social media. Tweet your comments, questions, and takeaways, and have fun. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Justin.
Great. Thanks so much, Erica and Amy, for joining, and everyone else who's on the line today. Really excited to talk about this topic of how do we truly empower every agent that we have in our organization to be the best that they can be. I think it's something that for any person on the line today, it's something that we'd love to see happen with every person that we have on the front line. So how can we make that happen? I want to begin by really understanding where have we come as contact centers and where have we come as organizations. And because of the change that's happened, and in particular very rapidly over the past few years, because of that change, there have been a couple of unique challenges that we face if we really want to have this idea of every agent being the best that they can be. So I want to explore that, and I want to begin by looking at a timeline of what's happened in the histories of contact centers. And the reality is up until the mid-90s, things were pretty even level. And for anyone that started in a contact center during that time or before then, you know what I'm talking about. Our customers had usually one way to access us or us to get a hold of them, and that was it. There was no such thing really as web self-service. There was no video chat, and there certainly wasn't social media support. But very rapidly, as changes in technology came about, and as the Internet truly grew into its prime, our customers suddenly found more ways to access information. Our organizations were bombarded with options, and we had a number of choices that we had to make to truly provide a great experience. And the first challenge that I'll talk about here before we even move on to the presentation is that things aren't going to slow down. The pace in which new technologies will be developed, the demands of our customers aren't going to decrease, and that we as leaders in these organizations, we as the people charged with making sure that our support teams, our front line of agents, are the best that they can be, it's going to require us to be nimble. It's going to require us to be strategic, but most importantly, it's going to require us to be focused on our goals and our objectives and our mission as an organization and what really matters to us and what are we trying to achieve at the end of the day as support centers. So these are the challenges that I want to explore while I have the time today. And the very first one is this idea of legacy systems. And the reality is that we have all of these different technologies that we're using in our centers today, and some of them are old, and some of them don't play nice with each other. And as a result, we've got disconnected communication, disconnected resources with the very tools that we're using to try to provide service, to try to effectively meet the needs of the people who are contacting us. So the first challenge we have to look at is this idea of legacy systems that are disjointed and disconnected from each other. The second reality and the second challenge is that customers, and I'm sure every single one of us as a customer can attest to this, we like to channel hop. I might have been on your website and tried to troubleshoot this myself. Actually, just yesterday I got a new wireless router and experienced this very thing. I started online and I did some research on how I can troubleshoot, and when that didn't work, I went to another channel and I sent an email in, and you know what, I'm an impatient person, and when my email didn't get responded to in a certain amount of time, I hopped on the phone, and I didn't like waiting on the phone, so I maybe sent something out on social media. And the reality is that's what all of our customers are doing. They're channel hoppers, and so we've got disconnected technologies. We've got customers who like to be all over the spectrum when it comes to channel choice. And so as a result, we get what I like to call lonely data, or in other words, information gets left behind. If we don't know where our customers are and our systems aren't communicating with each other and tracking the movement across that customer experience, we don't have a full picture. And if we don't have a full picture and we don't have the insight, we can't take actionable steps towards proper resolution. We can't be effective in planning how to meet our customers' needs. So that then really leads to this fourth challenge of agent disablement. And I don't believe that we intentionally do this. I really think that we want to see our agents be successful and to have the tools and the technology and the insight to meet our customers' needs. But the reality of what's happening is these legacy systems, these customers who like to channel hop, and us losing or not being able to do what to do with the data that we have available or not available, leads to agents who can effectively do their job. And then all of this is then added on to this idea of the contact center, and particularly those of us who are providing some sort of support capability. The complexity of that is only increasing. And so we have to do something. We have to do something to look at our legacy systems. We have to get a better understanding of what channels our customers want to be in and what their expectations are and how we can serve them. We need to figure out what, where, and how we can leverage data to the best of its capabilities so that we can empower our agents to be the best that they can be. Right, and so that we can go into this environment that's highly complex and we can truly provide a great experience. So let's take a look at this first piece of the agent's reality. And the truth is with the legacy systems is that today's agents use some old stuff. I was in a contact center just a couple months ago, and I had a flashback to the very first contact center I worked in, and they were using an AS400, right, dot space, green screen system, bless its soul. But the thing's dated, right? It's old, and it doesn't necessarily play nice, and it's kind of complicated. You get used to the tab button. And so not only do I have this old system, but because it's old and it doesn't play nice with my other systems, is I don't get one place to go for all the information. I've got multiple systems, and ICMI's research has shown that the average agent uses anywhere from 3 to 5 systems, and in some cases even more than that, just to do their day. And so they're constantly moving through all of these systems. And then on top of that, they've got a number of things that really could probably be automated, but they're not. their manual, and maybe that agent has this gigantic binder, right, that you probably know what I'm talking about, some of you, this 3-ring binder that has everything and anything they could need to know is in that binder, they hope. All right, which then brings me to my third point of questionable sources. And so maybe you do have a knowledge base, maybe you do have internal self-service, or you do have that binder, but your agents have learned over time that it doesn't necessarily get updated as frequently as it should, or it doesn't give the full picture. And then, so they start to wonder and they start to question and they start to doubt whether the integrity of the information, the accuracy of that source is really what it needs to be. And so they get to a place then where they just start to guess, make assumptions, or use the tool, but, and this is what scares me, they use the tool but it's broken and it's not right for the job. And so I want you to be thinking today as you're like, well, what are these challenges are and how can we overcome them? Is any of these 3 things, right, are they plaguing your contact center today? And if so, we're going to explore a little bit, and Amy's going to share some things as well as what can we do to prevent this from happening. So I talked about today's customer, how they really like to hop channels and they like to be a lot of places. So ICMI did some research on this to really understand what our customers want and where they want to be. And we found that 93% of customers would be more satisfied if they were offered their preferred channel. And I know this is true for me, and I'm sure many of you it's the same thing. You have a certain way you like to communicate, and you would love if everyone just catered to you and your preference. And we actually found that 49%, almost half, preferred it so much that if they had a competitor who offered service, offered the experience in their preferred channel, they would be willing to make the switch. And so I ask every single one of you, is that a risk that you're willing to take? And if it's not, then the next question that's probably in your mind is, well, what are these preferred channels? What are these preferred channels, and how do we really figure out what ones are right for our customers? So here's what we found from a research standpoint at ICMI is that voice is still number 1. All right, and there's not any indication that this is going to change anytime soon, and it's probably not a surprise to any of us, but voice is still number 1. But believe it or not, chat is one of the ones that's gaining a lot of traction, and currently 32% of contact centers are supporting chat as a support function. We've also seen that SMS, text messaging, and instant messengers are on the rise as well, with 37% and 29% respectively of contact centers looking to implement them. But the 2 channels that I really want to talk about from a support capability are video and self-service. And what I believe and what I truly think you're going to see, especially over the next 2 years, is that customer support is reaching a video age. There's research indicating within 2 years, 2/3 of the world's entire mobile data traffic will be related to video. But more importantly, and something that's incredibly relevant to the people that are on this webinar today, is that 48%, almost half of consumers, have reported to watching a support-related video within the last week. And again, I can attest to this just yesterday as I'm looking to make that install. One of the first places I went was a forum, and one of the first things I did was deploy a video to understand. Because the reality is, and why video and why self-service, I say, are so important, and when we think about these channels and the way in which we can support them, is that by and large, most customers want to help themselves. We want to feel empowered. We want to feel as if we can handle this problem, we can solve the issue. Right? We don't like to feel dumb. We definitely don't want to feel like we're not capable of doing this. And so the reality is that most customers want to help themselves. And forms of self-service like video, and why I brought that in, is that type of self-service, it promotes mobile engagement, which I'm sure every single one of you within arm's reach right now has a mobile device. Right? It promotes mobile engagement, it promotes customer loyalty, and it promotes customer satisfaction. So talking about self-service, the reality here with self-service is that most customers want to help themselves. And so going back again to video to pick up where we were, is that we found with video is that it's promoting mobile engagement, right? Most of you within arm's reach have a mobile device probably accessible. Having this video self-service available, it promotes customer loyalty and customer satisfaction. But the scary part here with having these self-service tools, having these capabilities available to us, is that when ICMI did a survey, we found that 64%, a majority of organizations, don't know whether a customer tried self-service and then had to go to a live rep. And this scares me because we're putting tools in place to create efficiencies and to make it easier for our customers, and then we unknowingly make it more complicated. We unknowingly do something that's causing a distraction, a disruption to the customer experience. And it throws me back to the maybe 10 or so years ago when Showtime rotisserie ovens were available. And if you remember the Showtime rotisserie oven, they had this saying that it's set it and forget it. Right, set it and forget it. And what scares me is a lot of organizations treat self-service. They treat their IVRs as a set it and forget it tool. And the reality is that is not the case. Right? The reality is that we need to know why these tools are in place, but more importantly, whether or not they're effectively meeting their reason for existence, whether or not they're effectively serving our customers' needs. And so another stat then, we know that a fifth of contact centers don't measure completion rates for IVR-only calls. So if someone calls in and tries to figure the information out for themselves within the IVR, we have no idea whether or not that was effective, and that's not sustainable. Right? Putting self-service, putting video tools into place, it's great because it satisfies customer needs, it keeps them engaged, and it creates efficiency for the organization. But if we're not checking their effectiveness, we're not measuring how well and to what extent our customers are using them, we're doing ourselves a greater disservice. But here's the real challenge of all of this. It's not just the fact that there's multiple channels. It's not just the fact that there's disconnected technologies. Right? The real challenge here is that our customers start in one channel and end in another. And so do we have a clear picture of where that customer's experience began, where they first went for help, and where they ended up truly getting the answer, truly getting their issue resolved? The other challenging piece to this is that the channels and the technologies that our customers used last year are slightly different from what they're using this year, and may be completely different from what they're using next year. And so do we have the capability, do we have the bandwidth to truly stay on top of what the technology is needed to serve those customer expectations, to stay on top of the channels that are out there and the ways in which our customers expect us to be helping them, and the training and the technology and the tools and the resources that are required to truly meet their needs there. Added into all of this, all of these channels, all of these multiple things, right, is our need to be forward-thinking, our need to constantly be moving forward as an organization. And so sometimes we just put things into place, we just put some training out, we just lead an initiative, and we say we're just going to see what happens. We're going to do some trial by fire here, and we think we need to be serving this channel, so let's just try it out with this channel. And we hear self-service is going to be effective, so we're just going to put some self-service options. We'll put some tutorials on the web, and we're going to leave it there, and that be it. But a quote that's really stuck with me recently, and that I think is really relevant to what we're talking about today, is if we don't intentionally do the right things, we unintentionally do the wrong things. If we don't intentionally put self-service into place that's built around what our customers' true needs and expectations are, right, we could get outcomes of customers who actually don't get their issues satisfied and have to call in or have to send an email, have to go to another channel. If we don't put agents who are properly skilled and properly equipped with the tools, the technologies, and the resources to get the answers, to solve the issue, but if we don't take the time to do that and make sure they're effectively meeting customers' needs, we end up with agents who are slightly ineffective, or we disable our agents unknowingly in their ability to serve the customer's needs. Right, and so the last challenge that I'll throw on top of this is this trend, big data. And I'll be honest with you, I don't like the term big data because really I think it's a bunch of fluff. There's always been a lot of information. What I think this really talks about is the capability of analytics, and what can we really do with all of this information that's at our fingertips, right, quote unquote big data, and how can we make it actionable? How can we truly glean insight? How can we understand what the trends are, and more importantly, what we need to impact? Where should we focus our time, our efforts, our energies today? And so then how does all of that tie in to this idea of agent empowerment and truly making our agents be the best agents that they can be? Right, well, the first piece here is that every single agent within your contact center has a specialized skill set. But more often than not, if we don't have the right self-service, we don't have the right tools, the right capabilities in place, right, we're wasting agents' time, we're wasting their talent, we're wasting their ability. We should really only be using our agents when absolutely necessary for the highest complexity, the highest value types of interactions. The next piece here is that knowledge is power. And we need to be able to provide our agents with this holistic view of the customer's experience, a holistic view of their history. What channels have they tried? What works? What doesn't work? And most importantly, at what point do we need to interject? Does our agent need to be there, and where can we best serve our customers? The simple stuff can be automated. Look at deploying intuitive self-service tools or automated process guidance. And take those simple things, those transactional, easy-based types of interactions, and take them away from the agent having to do it day in and day out and almost becoming robotic and manual in this process, and allow the agents, again, they have this specialized skill set to hire the more complex things that truly require critical thinking skills, that really require them to be flexible and nimble in their thinking. You should encourage communication and collaboration, not just within the contact center, with your business partners throughout your organization, and work together to really understand what is it today that's preventing your customers from having a great experience. What is it today that's preventing your agents from truly providing the support that they are designed and there to provide. And then this last piece of keep it fresh really just means be on this cycle of continuous improvement. I like to say wash, rinse, repeat, because like I said, the tools, the technologies, the needs of our customers will change from this year to next year. And we need to be ready, we need to be armed, and we need to be mindful of what those are and prepared to handle them as they change, because believe me, they will change. And that brings me to a quote that I want to end with for my piece. It was from Keith Dawson at Ovum, and I really like this, and it's stuck with me here. And it's that we are still in the early days of what will clearly be a years-long revolution in how companies and customers communicate. But what's clear is that agents are still going to be the focal point for the highest complexity and highest value interactions. And really that's where I want to turn it over to you, Amy, and where I want to leave it to everyone here is that our agents are here to handle the highest complexity and the highest value interactions. So are we removing their roadblocks, and are we giving them the tools and the capabilities to truly do that?
Thank you, Justin. That was a great overview of the challenges that contact centers are facing today. Just before I dive in deep into Support.com's perspective on the same thing, for those of you who are not familiar with us, we're a publicly traded company. We have over 1,800 employees. Over 1,000 of those employees are in our own contact center. So we come from the contact center world. And where we started was in complex support for home networking, for PCs and computers a few years ago. And so we provide Tier 2 support. We're the company behind complex support for home networks for Comcast. We are Office Depot's Tech Depot. We're actually, Support.com is used in more stores than the Geek Squad. So our DNA is in solving complex problems. And out of that, over 20 million support interactions, what we realized is that we have over 1,000 smart agents, all of whom were not necessarily driving in the same direction every time a customer called in. And we developed the Nexus platform for contact centers to optimize support interactions out of our own learnings for what it really takes to reduce AHT at the same time as increasing NPS. And I'll get into some details on that. So as Justin said, customers have a single view of a company. They want the companies that they work with to be nimble, to whether or not they're in the exploration stage of buying, or they've bought it, or they're trying to learn more, or they're in the support stage. They want that company to have a single view, whichever agent they're talking to, whether or not it's via live support, via chat, or via self-service. And that's, in today's complex world with an explosion of IoT devices and an explosion of channels to interface with customers, that's even harder for contact centers to keep up with. And then if we take a look about our own systems, this is not an accurate picture of where Sport.com was 2 years ago when we started doing that complex Tier 2 support. It is not intentional that we create these silos and this disconnected technology, but it just happens over time as we add new programs in for new customers, or we have new SKUs that we're supporting, or we're selling new initiatives, or we're servicing new products. These disconnected technologies happen. And moreover, the knowledge that agents need to solve customer issues, to onboard customers, gets scattered not just in notebooks, but in emails from the training managers. This is a new process. They get buried in customer comments. The product teams aren't necessarily integrated in. And the knowledge bases don't necessarily reflect the agent's knowledge of what works and what doesn't. So the support knowledge gets scattered, and we saw the same thing. So this is the problem that we set out to address. So to step back, there's typical tools that are deployed in a contact center that we're all familiar with. There's the infrastructure telephony tools, the ACD IVR. We're used to hiring people at scale. There's even new virtual agents. We work with vendors to put in our servers, phone, internet. We're all very good at that in our contact centers at putting an infrastructure and actually also putting applications on top of it. We are good at optimizing even. We have in our contact centers people whose titles are workforce optimization. They put in tools for that. We've put in CRM and we optimize that. The great contact centers, as Justin said, are constantly optimizing their ACD and IVR. What's ironic is that we spend so much time in our contact centers optimizing, making sure that the right call or chat or video shows up to the right agent at the right time with the right skill set. And at exactly that moment, we revert to these manual processes of the binders and the emails. So we believe at Sport.com that there's actually an opportunity to optimize what happens during a live support interaction. There's no reason to rely only on call recordings, only on coaching, and only on emails. And we've found that there's a way around that. So first of all, let's just talk about what happens with that live support interaction. With this proliferation of channels, and as Justin said, the customer's desire to do self-service, there's companies have created DIY support. They've created peer groups using products like Lithium. They have FAQs. The knowledge bases can be self-service. And what happens is that sort of by necessity, the simpler problems get deflected to self-service, so that by the time the call or the chat shows up to your contact center for resolution, it's more difficult than it was a year ago because your self-service is getting better. So the technology problems are getting more important and more difficult to solve, and yet when we think about all the data we have available to us in the contact center for, as I said, for the workforce, for the IVR, for our telephony, for our infrastructure, and yet the data for what exactly happens during a live support call is often a black box. And yet that's where we spend most of our money when it comes to labor. That's where so much training and effort goes in. So when we saw that, what we did was we developed Nexus. Nexus is cloud software for optimizing the live support interaction. Our goal is to turn every single agent in our contact centers and yours into your most productive agents. And how it works is that Nexus is like GPS for agents. Just like when we're trying to figure out how to get from San Francisco to Chicago and we put it in Google Maps, it's the same thing that we provide contact center agents. We tell them via Nexus to take this step and the following step via what we call guided paths. So we give your agents what they need when they need it by guiding and automating the support interaction. The benefit to the contact center is multifold. You get the agents actually all solving issues or onboarding customers in the same process. But even more importantly, you actually capture for the very first time step-by-step data on what agents are doing. How long does it take for an agent to do that first step with a customer? Which of my agents are actually taking that step? Did that step solve the customer's problem? Is this process that I've mapped out the best process to solve problems? If I have a product that is connected to the internet, do I know which version of firmware is causing most of the problems automatically? So all of this data is available to the contact center for optimization. So instead of just relying on coaching, you can now use interaction analytics to process bottlenecks, to make sure your agents are compliant with process, and just as importantly, learn from your best agents which processes you might want to roll out to others. And of course, it integrates in with your current system so that your agents aren't having to swivel chair. So we provide analytics that allow you to tell which of your agents are compliant by team, by contact center. And in fact, here's an example of how we are tracking a single guided path. How long on average does it take for each step on the guided path for the agent to follow, so that you can in fact determine where the bulk of the time is happening. So the agent perspective is that they follow guided steps and see contextual information. So we provide a step-by-step guidance. It's not like a rail that they're forced to follow, but it does give them the process that the company and the contact center prefers. And then at each step, they're provided with contextual information on what they need to know at that step. So it could be offer the customer this. It could go out and grab data from the CRM and tell the agent which SKU the customer is authorized to be upgraded to. It could also, if you have consumer electronics devices, reach out automatically to the device and grab information about it. For example, Nexus is used today in contact centers for warranty avoidance of returns. And they reach out to a customer calls with a mobile phone, calls into the contact center and says, I'd like to return it. The agent reaches out via Nexus and resets the phone and attempts to fix the phone. That's just an example of the kind of contextual information that can be displayed to the agent. And most importantly, it's what they need to know at that moment. It's not every bit of information about the customer that they have to dig through, and it's not every bit of information about the knowledge article to scan through. It's what they need to know at that moment. And these guided paths that are created for your agents don't require a PhD in computer science. They don't require actually any IT help at all. They're drag and drop Our training managers in our contact center set up the guided paths for our agents. It takes literally minutes to set one of these up. And then you can roll them out simultaneously because Nexus is a cloud application to thousands or tens of thousands of agents. And that really reduces the training time. When you just change one step, you don't need to take everybody off the phones and explain to them that this is the new knowledge article, this is the new step. It automatically shows up as part of the guided path when they're solving the customer's problem. So that's a quick and high-level overview of Nexus service platform. We're excited to offer this to other contact centers, and I look forward to your questions to Justin and I.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy, and Justin as well. This has been really interesting. And as I mentioned earlier, we do like to save just a few minutes at the end of every presentation to take some of your audience questions. So before we dive into those, I just want to let you know that if for some reason we don't get a chance to answer your question live during this portion, we will be sure that we answer all the questions that are left in the queue offline following the presentation. Also, before we get into the Q&A portion, I just want to take a moment and direct you to the feedback form that you should have just seen pushed out to you. We really do value your feedback, so if you don't mind taking just a moment or two after the presentation wraps up and let us know what you thought of the presentation today, that will greatly help us as we're preparing for future webinars. So with that being said, Justin and Amy, why don't we go ahead and get to some of these audience questions. So, Amy, I'm going to point the first one to you. We had a question come in from the audience, and they're curious to know what are the use cases for live support optimization?
We've seen in our early customers, of course, inbound support requests for Tier 2 and Tier 3. But we also have seen it used in sales environments to have to make sure that the agents, the sales agents are offering the customer the right offer at that moment. We've seen uptake, as I mentioned, in warranty services and onboarding and enablement. We have a customer who's in home automation that is using Nexus to reach out and make sure they have a sort of a complex environment where there's webcams and pet cams and front door locks and security to get that customer enabled successfully, because that's a lot of products that need to work together successfully. So onboarding, enablement, sales, as well as typical customer Tier 2 support.
Okay, great examples. Justin, you're up next. So earlier in the presentation, you mentioned that customers would be more satisfied if they were offered their preferred channel, but how do contact centers figure out what channels their customers really prefer?
Yeah, no, good question. So it can depend. And the key thing first is to really ask your customers. And whether you're doing that through a formal survey, whether you're doing it through a focus group, the key thing to understand is how your customers are trying to serve themselves today and where they're frustrated. And often it's surveying or customer feedback is one of the first places to look. You know, the second place that I would say is look at the types of interactions that you're doing frequently but are low effort from the agent's behalf. Maybe they are those things that you know are transactional, and maybe they account for a large portion of your contact volume. And those, the first thing I would say is look to move those to self-service. That's often the easiest transition and one of the easiest channel implementations to make. You know, jumping into serving social media or chat can be more complicated. So my recommendation is to really look two places. One, your customers, but two, look within your contact center and understand where are you spending a lot of time answering questions today that, you know, maybe you can free your agents up to handle something more complex.
Great. Thank you, Justin. So just saw a really interesting question that came in from Antonio. Early on in the presentation, Justin, you mentioned that phone still remains the #1 preference for customers. But I think this is just kind of a fun way to look into the future, and I would love your thoughts, Justin, as well as Amy's. Antonio says, with all of the upcoming technology, we've got smarter IVRs, we've got MMS support, how much longer do you guys think the higher preference of speaking to a person on the phone versus a machine will last? So no wrong or right answers, but would love to hear your thoughts.
I love that question. That's awesome. Thank you, Antonio. So I'll share my feedback, and Amy can do as well. I think it's going to depend, Antonio, on the type of contact. I do believe that for a lot of support interactions that we'll see, banking saw this by and large. Banking saw a lot of people who were used to come to their brick and mortar locations, and then with mobile technology, IVR self-service, they've moved. There was just a statistic in there. I want to say it was about Bank of America. About they do, X millions of transactions a week, and the majority of their interactions are not happening with a human. They're happening with technology. So I think it's going to depend on the type of interaction. I think for services that are more specialized, that are perhaps higher value, maybe sales types of interactions, perhaps, I think about vacation planning to a certain degree. I think some of those it'll be a longer timeline versus perhaps support technology, troubleshooting, those types of things that really are more effectively resolved in a lot of cases through non-traditional channels. I just think it's going to depend on the type of interaction.
Great. Amy, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I agree with Justin. It really depends on the type of the interaction. It also depends upon our ability to solve the customer's problems via these other channels. So often the live interaction for some types of support can be the method of last resort. And that's why we're all investing so hard in improving self-service. But call deflection, it's great for contact centers, but sometimes the customer just really does need to talk to a live person. So as we improve our technologies, I think as Justin said in banking, people began to accept that they didn't need to talk to a live person because they felt their banking was complex. But the technology was there to make the customer feel secure and safe. So we can't push customers to a channel before they're ready, and our technology that gets there. But I think there's just a lot of really cool technology coming up that's going to make people more comfortable with other channels other than the live one. And Justin said, I think live is always going to be there for the more complex or high-value interaction.
And one thing I want to add on to that too, which from a staffing standpoint, this is contact centers are really starting to see this effect, is as we get smarter with our use of self-service and we move those transactional types of things off of the agents, the interactions are just increasing in complexity. And what was for a lot of contact centers a frontline entry-level type of position is starting to become and will soon be, in all cases, not that, because the person-to-person live interaction is going to be of such value, of such complexity that it truly is a specialized skill set, regardless of what industry, regardless of what you're doing. And so contact centers are going to see, you're improving efficiencies one place, but you're going to have to pay people more. You're going, what I mean? There's going to be other implications beyond just fewer interactions going to the front line. Now the front line is going to be really different than what it looks like today.
Yeah, we're going to need a lot more tools and a lot more capabilities. And we found the same thing. I mean, we solve home networking issues in our contact centers. One of the programs we do. And you can't hire PhDs in home networking by the hundreds. You have to have the technology that allows them to I mean, they need to be bright, but if we had to pay them at the level that would require, if we didn't have the technology to walk them through it, we couldn't be in business. That's a really good point.
Yep. Great points and examples from both of you. It will be interesting to see how things continue to shake out over the next few years. I want to go back to self-service for a moment because I'm seeing a lot of questions come in from our audience around that. So this is kind of a two-part. So thank you, Mary Beth and Jeff, for your questions. So first off, how do you push people to self-service? And then secondly, how do you measure success rates with self-service?
So I'm going to share an example from my wireless router experience yesterday on how they tried to push me to self-service. I called in, and while I'm waiting on the phone, one of the first things I heard is, don't want to wait, you can go online and blah, 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 blah. So one of the first pieces is informative. People might not be using your self-service because they don't realize it exists or they don't know where it exists. So one of the possibilities is to use your other channels. In this case, phone is a great example of that, to inform people of that. Another option is to also, if it's answered by a live agent, but you know it can effectively be resolved in self-service, is in the post case, if they're sending an email, any type of documentation, to also provide the customer at that point with, if you have this problem in the future, you can go online at XXX blah blah blah, whatever it is, to resolve your issue. So those are just two examples that I can think of. One is through actively pushing it on another channel while customers are waiting, and the second is kind of a post-op piece to inform customers that you can resolve the same type of issue in the future through our self-service channels.
Great. Thanks, Dustin. So any advice on measuring success rates with self-service?
So there's a couple things that you can do. One of the first places is through your customer satisfaction surveys and asking people, did you attempt to resolve this on our website, prior to calling in, something along those lines, just to get the base level yes, no. One of the best ways to understand whether or not self-help is successful is to do usability testing. Have a collaborative design process with whoever's putting your self-service tools into place. It amazes me how many times I ask a contact center, have you tried to solve this issue yourself? One thing I did at one of my contact centers is I would have every new training class. One of the ways they learned how to do things was by using our self-help channels that our customers used. If that couldn't teach a brand new agent on my team how to do that, someone who had a bit of information but was still relatively not an insider at that point yet, if they couldn't learn how to do it, how could I expect a customer who has zero insight into the inner workings of my organization, how could I expect them to learn from that? To me personally, that's how I've seen a great way to test success and true effectiveness of self-service tools is through sound usability testing.
Okay, good advice. So Amy, I've got another question for you. This just came in from the audience, and it says, how can we incorporate Nexus into our call center? So hoping you might be able to give us a bit more context.
Well, Nexus integrates in with CRM systems, and generally what happens is the call center has their typical systems for routing, the support call or chat to the agent, at which point they press a button, Nexus pops up, and then they start walking through the guided path. Typical training time is, in our experience, less than a couple of hours to get used to Nexus and the customers we've rolled it out in. And then that's when the fun part happens, when you actually get to start analyzing what's happening during the live support interaction. We had a customer did not realize that how much time was spent before outbounding on a call for sales in prepping for the call, because that's what the process told them to do it. They analyzed it, and they realized that they were spending 74% of the average handle time on prepping for calls where the customer wasn't necessarily there. They rolled out a new process, and within 24 hours, they took an AHT that was over 12 minutes to a little over 2 minutes. And it's not rocket science. It's just you have the data and you have the insights and you can start to roll it out. So this is about providing contact center managers with the same capabilities and insights for optimization that they have in other parts of the contact center. But if you'd specifically like to roll out Nexus in your contact center, feel free to reach out to me, amy.millard@sport.com. Happy to chat.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy. Justin, I have another question for you. You talked about big data, which has undoubtedly been one of the biggest buzzwords over the last year or so. But do you have any advice on how to effectively use all of the metrics and analytics tools that exist out there?
Sure. You talk about metrics, you talk about big data, and I just think about analysis paralysis. Those are the two words that come to mind for me, is because we have so much information and we don't know what we really want to do with it. So what I always encourage organizations to do is take a step back and figure out what are their big initiatives for the next year. Because reality is there's only going to be 2 or maybe 3 things that they're really trying to focus on achieving. And then I say that look at the metrics, looking at the tools that you're running, the way you're leveraging analytics, and align them with achieving those objectives. Because just because we have the ability to measure everything and anything, A, doesn't mean we should, and it doesn't mean that by measuring it we're actually going to be able to change anything. So it's really focusing on if say reducing customer effort. I've seen a number of questions, both kind of showing up here from the webinar, but also here the question of what do people really care about? Do they care about making the interaction easy for them? Do they expect to be receive this wow level of service? What do people really want? One of the top things that people really want is us to respect their time. We only have a certain amount of it, and we really don't want to waste any of it. So for me, it's aligning with who your organization is from a kind of a mission, vision, values perspective. Why do we exist in the first place? Understanding that the number one thing your customers want you to do is respect their time, and then measure the things that help you get to this place of being who you are as an organization, in alignment with your values, and delivering this experience that your customers want in as little time as possible, with have them having to give as little effort as possible. So it's kind of a short answer to a really deep question. I would say from a metric standpoint and understanding tools and capabilities, this is one where I always encourage people to reach out to myself or use ICMI's website as a really great tool to understand what people are doing and what capabilities are out there.
Okay. Great answer. Well, it looks like we are nearing the end of our hour, but we might have time to fit in one more question. It looks like Jeff had a question around IVR optimization. So with all the channels out there, a lot going on, what is the best way to set up the IVR and then to gather data from it?
Justin, I'll let you take that one.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. That's a good question. This is another one where IVR. I'm going to take it 2 places. We talk about so many channels, but then also really understanding the set up the IVR. This is where we have to have this fine line of your customer doesn't want to have to press a million buttons. But at the same time, they want to get to the right person. Amy made this comment earlier. It's something that I believe in. It's getting the customer to the right agent with the right skill set at the right time, and finding that perfect marriage without the customer feeling like they had to click 18 buttons to get there. So this goes back to really 2 things. One, your IVR setup depends on the skill sets and capabilities of your agents. If you are highly specialized, then your IVR is going to be more complicated as a result, unless you want to deal with your customers getting transferred around. This is one where I really believe that the more that you can have multi-skilled pooled agent groups, not only is it nice from an efficiency standpoint, but from an IVR and a routing standpoint, I know it's a lot easier for me to get you to somebody who can assist you. So from a planning and setup standpoint, you have to consider, what's the customer's experience before they get to the agent? How many decisions do they have to make? Knowing that a good percentage of them are just going to try to zero out anyway, and then when they get to that agent, who is that agent? What capabilities and flexibility do you have there to create, whether it's specialized or generalized pooled groups? From a collecting data perspective, there's a couple things that you can do. You can run web analytics. You can use search logs. You can use, again, customer feedback. I have war stories about organizations with really bad IVR design that just by clicking in and calling in, you knew that it was just complicated. If you can't figure out, again, how do you expect your customers? So, as far as understanding the data from it, I would say, use analytics you can get depending on, what your telephony and routing your ACD systems. There might be some reports that you can run in there, but also usability and getting insight from your customer.
I feel like we could probably do a whole webinar around bad IVRs.
Probably.
But thanks for taking that one, Justin. So our hour is quickly coming to a close, so I'm afraid that that's all the time that we have for today. But as I did mention earlier, please don't worry if we did not get the chance to answer your question live right now, because we will be sure to follow up with you all after the presentation today and make sure that any questions left in the queue are answered. And I also want to remind you that you can download a PDF version of the slides through this console right after we end the presentation. And do keep an eye out on your email. Tomorrow or Monday you should be receiving directions to view the on-demand version of today's presentation. So Justin and Amy, I want to thank you both for your time today. This has certainly been really informative. I want to thank everyone for attending today. And I do need to mention that this presentation is copyright 2014 by ICMI. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by ICMI, which is solely responsible for its content, and Support.com is responsible for their content and opinions. On behalf of ICMI and our sponsor, Support.com, thank you for attending today, and I do encourage you to join us for one of our remaining webinars in 2014. So head over to icmi.com/resources for more info, and have a great afternoon.